The architecture of subtraction. There's a strange, sobering moment that happens when you finally grow exhausted by your own existence. Not because you are weak, not because you failed, but because you have spent years carrying dead weight that was never yours to bear. A man can hold a respected position, live under a stable roof, walk among crowds, and still feel spiritually bankrupt. Why? Because every morning he wakes up hauling invisible chains. Someone else's expectation, an old mistake long settled by time, an expired relationship held together by guilt, and a desperate fear of disappointing people who never truly saw him. Most modern self-improvement is obsessed with addition, stacking 10 more morning habits into an already chaotic schedule. But real mastery is not accumulation, it is amputation. The next evolution of your life isn't hiding behind something you need to go out and acquire. It is waiting beneath the things you finally have the courage to remove. 1. The urge to explain yourself. The first burden to amputate is the instinct to defend your existence. You change your direction, you decline an invitation, leave an unfulfilling career, or stop answering every late-night call, and immediately, a courtroom convenes inside your head. You start pleading your case, explaining your intentions, and hoping for their blessing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that another person's judgment is completely outside his control. When you over-explain a decision, you aren't offering clarity, you are begging for permission. You are signaling that their validation matters more than your sovereignty. Maturity begins when you understand that some people are committed to misunderstanding you because your growth threatens their comfort. State your boundary calmly. Say, "I have made my decision," and then allow the silence to do the heavy lifting. 2. The poison of comparison. Centuries ago, a man could live an honorable life measured strictly against his own potential. Today, before your feet even touch the floor, a single glass screen bombards you with curated illusions of men richer, healthier, and supposedly happier than you. You are comparing your backstage reality, your doubts, your quiet struggles, your unglamorous Tuesdays, to someone else's carefully engineered highlight reel. The Stoics had a sharper compass. Seneca asked, "Why do you look at what others have, rather than what you are becoming? If your definition of success requires standing ahead of another person, you will remain an eternal prisoner to a race with no finish line. Stop competing with ghosts. Build your intellect, fortify your body, master your craft, and let the rest of the world chase their own shadows." 3. Energetic liabilities, the expired alliance. Not everyone who drains your spirit is an evil person. Most of the time, you have simply outgrown the dynamic. You know the conversations, cyclical complaints, trivial drama, subtle jealousy, and disguised hostility. You enter the room upright and leave it feeling heavy and depleted, yet you stay loyal out of habit. You confuse history with obligation, but history is merely context. It is not a binding contract on your future. You do not need a dramatic confrontation, a screaming match, or a staged exit. Simply alter their access. Speak less, volunteer fewer details, and withdraw your emotional investment. The strongest boundary on earth is not an argument. It is a quiet, permanent change in proximity. 4. Nocturnal overthinking. It is 2 in the morning. The world is dark and resting, but your mind is running an endless simulation. You are replaying a slight from 6 months ago, predicting catastrophes that haven't occurred, and agonizing over choices you cannot undo. Overthinking is the mind's cruelest deception. It tricks you into believing you are solving a crisis when you are merely rehearsing anxiety. Epictetus offered a razor-sharp filter to dismantle this. Is this within my control? If yes, execute the action tomorrow. If no, release it immediately. Your consciousness is depleted when you force it to dwell in times and places your physical body cannot reach. Return to the present hour. Today is the only territory where your will holds jurisdiction. 5. The addiction to instant reward. We live in an era engineered for instant dopamine. One tap, one scroll, one digital validation point. The tragedy isn't just that these cheap comforts exist. It is that they erode your capacity to endure the quiet void of waiting. You sit down to build something monumental, and 5 minutes in, the silence terrifies you, driving your hand back toward a screen. You train your mind to demand the crown before swinging the sword. But every structure of lasting consequence, unshakable character, deep mastery, generational wealth, and internal peace, demands delayed gratification. Learn to find dignity in the unglamorous repetition. Finish the arduous task. Keep your word when nobody is clapping. You're not just chasing an outcome. You're forging an intellect that cannot be bought cheaply. 6. The expired identity. Sometimes the greatest jailer of your life isn't your environment. It is the outdated story you recite about who you are. I'm simply not disciplined. I'm bad with money. I'm naturally anxious. When you repeat an excuse long enough, it ceases to be an observation and becomes a fortress. Perhaps years ago you were naive, undisciplined, and allowed people to treat you with disrespect. That was an event. It is not your permanent essence. You have full sovereign permission to change. You are allowed to become colder to distraction, sharper in focus, and unrecognizable to who you were 5 years ago. The past gave you information. It does not hold the deed to your future. 7. The sabotage of inner dialogue. There is an uninterrupted dialogue occurring within your psyche that no other human will ever witness. And far too often, you speak to yourself with a cruelty you would never tolerate from an enemy. You drop a ball and proclaim yourself useless. You face rejection and conclude you are unlovable. You mistake a temporary stumble for an absolute character flaw. Stoicism does not advocate for shallow delusions or toxic positivity. It demands precision. There's an immense psychological gulf between "I failed at this objective" and "I am a failure." The first describes a tactical event. The second assassinates your identity. Speak to yourself with absolute truth, but govern that speech with iron discipline. 8. Chasing those who do not choose you. One of the most pathetic wastes of human energy is negotiating for affection, respect, or inclusion. When someone treats you with indifference, your instinct is often to prove your value, to message again, to perform harder, to buy their attention with compliance. Cease immediately. You cannot negotiate respect. You cannot beg for authentic loyalty. If an individual repeatedly offers you distance, treat that behavior as clear, unvarnished data. Do not make their rejection your personal crusade. Do not spend years attempting to convince them that you are worthy of basic human decency. Walk away with clean, unshakable composure. You cannot dictate who values you. You can only dictate whether you dishonor yourself by begging for scraps. 9. The terror of isolation. There is a fundamental chasm between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the desperate panic that nobody is validating your existence. Solitude is the sacred sanctuary where you finally meet yourself without distraction. When your phone stops ringing and your social calendar clears, amateur minds panic and assume they are abandoned. The Stoic recognizes that life has just granted him an enormous tactical advantage. Room to think, space to reconstruct his standards, and time to become entirely content in his own company. When you master being alone without feeling empty, you become virtually impossible to manipulate. You stop accepting toxic bargains simply to escape the silence of an empty room. 10. The illusion of external control. And now we reach the foundational pillar that anchors all others, the delusion that you can control the world around you. You cannot govern the opinions of men, the volatility of the economy, or the hand destiny deals you. Imagine standing on a rocky precipice during a violent sea storm. You cannot order the waves to flatten. You cannot bargain with the lightning. But you possess absolute sovereignty over whether your knees buckle or you stand unyielding against the gale. Tonight, do not plan an impossible revolution for tomorrow. Start small. Amputate one useless argument. Cut one toxic habit. Close the door on one expired relationship. And do not post about it. Do not announce it. Do not look for approval. Move in absolute silence and allow the quiet weight of your transformation to shake the ground beneath their feet.